All right, family. As you know, we're doing Mystery of Myself. And so we're going to go into the second phase. And what we're going to be talking about is what is the purpose of the mask? That's what we're going to be talking about in this phase of this particular episode, okay? As I said, I decided to do the classes um, as a series. So this is episode one, and this is the second phase of that episode. And we're going to be talking about what is the purpose of the mask, okay? The mask was never random, it was technically a spell that we cast to protect ourselves, okay? Each of these points explain how and why the mask gets created in the first place. So we're going to be talking about the survival mechanism of the mask. We're going to be talking about protection and wounding, social adaptation, and the illusion of control. That's what we're going to be talking about. This is the Mystery of Myself series. So this is what we're going to be talking about in this session, okay? Let's keep it moving, family. All right? So we're going to cover the survival mechanism of the mask, okay? The mask forms, the mask forms in early life as a psychological shield, okay? Especially in traumatic and unstable or judgmental environments. Children learn quickly: if I act this way, I'm safer, loved, or left alone. This becomes an identity loop we repeat unconsciously. Giving an example, a child who learns to be quiet to avoid conflict may grow up wearing the calm, agreeable mask, never expressing true opinions or how they feel, not really speaking up for themselves. Okay. Then we talk about the mask pretty much being used as protection from wounds. The mask can also block emotional pain or shame. It becomes armor against judgment, rejection, or abandonment. Over time, the mask gets praised, so we think this is who I must be. And for some of us, we think this is who I am. Okay, so this kind of falls under the guise of knowing who you are and who you're not, what you are and what you're not. Okay, example: a high achiever masks hiding deep fears of not being enough. The rebel mask often hides unprocessed betrayal. And I think all of us have experienced that in one way or another. The next point I'm going to make is social adaptation. All right? Social adaptation. In our society, masks are rewarded. Certain identities are considered more valuable. We wear what's marketable, we wear what's palatable or comfortable for others. All right? The more we adapt, these disconnected, the more we adapt, the more disconnected we become from our original essence. For example, wearing the mask of a strong black woman mask may mean never being allowed to be soft, tender, or vulnerable. So as a black woman, as black women, and I'm not saying it's not for other demographics, but that's been a common theme, amongst black women, wearing the mask of being strong and taking care of everything, and independent, and really being in predicaments where we've been robbed of femininity, peace, having tranquility, calmness, um, soft, soft life. So that's a perfect example. The next thing we're going to deal with is the illusion of control. Okay, masks create the feeling that we're in control of how we are perceived. In other words, of how people look at us. But that perception is a cage. It's exhausting to uphold and dangerous when we begin to believe it's real. Giving you an example, a perfectionist mask may control how others see you. It can block authenticity, authentic connection, and creativity. Um, I will say I can speak, I can sympathize, empathize, and identify with this. Um, Being autistic on the other side of the spectrum, we have gifts and we have skill sets and we have talents. And a lot of times we have to default in alter ego, and it can be exhausting and stressful when you're constantly constantly in the alter ego, not out of necessity per se, or out of default of what you do or the talent that you may have, et cetera, gift, but having to live in that ego, which earlier we talked about being a cage because that's more palatable to most people, or that's what's acceptable to most people. They accept that part of you, that alter ego, and you don't have the convenience or the privilege, or sometimes you feel like you don't even have a say so in reference to just being your total authentic self, you know. So there's a lot of talented musicians that are authentic and singers, and a lot of them live in the alter ego on a constant basis because that's what's most accepted. They're not treated weirdly, or they're not um, being frowned upon, or people not distancing themselves or giving them weird looks. But at the same time, yes, that looks like the normal perspective of you, and that is you, but that's not the only part of you. So a lot of them don't even have the opportunity to relax or either refluctuate between the two altars because they're all constantly living in one altar so that it can be accepted from everybody else. And so I've definitely I've had to deal with that over the years. And just as the past couple of years, I've just been open with both altars, all alter personas or egos. I don't like to use the word ego because it has a negative connotation, but um, there's a version of me that teaches like this, and then there's a whole nother version of me. You know what I'm saying? That's probably my most comfortable version of me, but not many people get to see that. Um, so, but having to constantly live in this version of me, this professional and up to par and things like that, when you can't be yourself around nobody and you're constantly locked in this version, it does feel like a cage. You know what I mean? So it's important to have people that you can trust with the whole volume of who you are. You know what I mean? They can trust you can trust them with the whole volume of who you are. You know what I mean? 'Cause a lot of times we have perception or we have the persona of strong and grounded and this and the other. And there's another version of you that's vulnerable. There's another version of you that's, you know, introverted, not as outspoken, you know. Um, so be thankful, if you do have people that you can show the whole volume of who you are to them. Okay. So we're going to talk about, the reflection is the mask. has done its job. It's helped you survive, and that's what the mask has done. It's helped us to survive. Okay, but now it's time to ask: is it helping me live? And so that's what I want to talk about a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Because it's not until these past couple of years that I've been actually able to live in the whole volume of who I am unapologetically. So the mask of control, I'd have to say that has been my struggle, and being able to take off that mask and just living in the whole volume of who I am. You know what I mean? Unapologetically. So that's one of the things that we have to qualify. We recognize, and we're very grateful and we're very thankful for the mask that's helped us survive, that's preserved us, preserved our minds and our mental. But has these masks over time became handicaps, and it's preventing us from living the whole volume of who we are. Okay, that's one of the things. All right. All right, we're going to go into the common masks that we wear. Let's talk about that. Okay. We wear masks not just to hide, but to be accepted, praised, or protect our wounds. But every mask becomes a contract. All right. This is what we're kind of delving into something a little bit more serious now. I already know what I'm doing. The good one. We call it we have the good one, the achiever, the caretaker, the rebel, the perfect one, and the invisible one. I think all of us have worn one of these masks, if not all, one time or another in our lives, and some of us are still wearing some of these masks. Okay, so let's get into it, and let's see if you can see a part of yourself or reflection of yourself in any of these masks that we described. Okay, let's get into it, family. Talk about the good one. Always polite, always generous, never disruptive. This mask fears rejection if they disappoint anyone, rooted in childhood and people pleasing. Often hides suppressed anger, exhaustion, or self abandonment. The shadow of this is rage, or the end result, we wouldn't say that, would be rage, resentment, the martyr complex. Now, I'd have to say, and I've said this before, anybody that's been following me for a couple of years, that this was a mask that I wore a long time ago. A long time ago. This is not who I am today, but this particular mask I'm very familiar with. I was the people pleaser, always the agreeable one, never disruptive. That was me years ago. That was me years ago, and I think I was probably the worst or the best mask wearer when it came to this particular mask. Um, and wearing that mask wore me down so much that I crashed out. Probably, I think I had to crash out probably about 2 or 3 times, until I got tired of me. Not tired of people, but tired of me and letting people walk over me and not speaking up for myself and not taking up for myself. You know what I'm saying? I went from one extreme to the other until the point I was able to come to a balance. And what do I mean by that? I went from one extreme being pathetic, you know what I mean, all the way to just rude, abrasive, very just blunt, rude. ugly to the point that I had to be honest with myself. Unto thyself be true, but in my truth, I had to lace it with grace. And so that's the process I went through, um, demasking this particular type of mask. We'll get more into that later. All right, the achiever, obsessed with success, always has a goal, feels unsafe or invisible without a mission. External validation becomes the fuel, often rooted in needing to improve worthiness. The shadow or the end result of that is fear of failure, unworthiness, and burnout. Um, being honest with you all concerned, this was me. Some of this, I'll say not all of it, but some of it I can definitely identify with and reference. Just looking to the retrospect of my past. Um, uh, and y'all can say in the comments whether or not this is something you all resonate with. But external validation becomes fuel. Wanting to be validated from family. You know what I mean? The burnout part, absolutely. The unworthiness, definitely dealt with that. Um, always the one part I want to talk about is feeling unsafe or invisible without a mission. That was one that I can definitely identify with that. With the mission part, and part of that was rooted in religion. You know what I'm saying? You got a call in your life. You got to go to the nations and that type thing. You know what I'm saying? It was always a mission behind a change or shift that happened in my life. And it became chronic. You know what I'm saying? I'm seeking a mission in everything. Um, I call it mission psychosis. You know what I mean? And I think it was a chain of events. This is what broke me. It was a chain of events that took place. And I just was mission, you know, for lack of a better word, just a mission whore. I'm just the only way I can say it. And I thought about it one day. I said, okay, so a chain of events had me go to another city. All right, had to move to another city. And the craziest thing is, this was the first time that I got to a place where I said, you know what? Suppose there's not a mission. Um, suppose there's not a mission. And so when I got to the city, it was more or less like, suppose there not there's I don't think there's a mission per se. I think that the mission is for me to rest. There was nothing to fulfill. There was not a call, a beckoning call waiting on me. There was no mission. The only thing I was supposed to do was just rest and be. And sometimes our mission is not this grandiose, so save the world type thing. Sometimes the purpose of change is just to be and rest. It's not always about, oh, I'm moving to the city because I got a call on my life, or I'm moving to the city because I have a mission to fulfill. Sometimes you're moving to a city to rest and just be. And you don't know how powerful resting and being is. Okay. So there's some parts in this that I do identify with when I look into just the retrospect of my life. Caretaker, that's the next one. I think all of us, especially if you're an empath, all of us have worn this mask. gives to everyone but themselves, finds identity in being needed, may be raised in codependence and narcissistic households, absolutely. Um, uses service to feel valuable and often suppress personal needs. And I talk about this a lot. The shadow or the crash out would be guilt, resentment, and lack of boundaries. The people pleaser, I was also the caretaker. Okay, all right. So I don't mind being transparent about my life. Because if I can tell somebody what people could possibly look at as past shame, maybe you can appreciate the shine today, and that'll give you hope. I'm not giving you false hope or anything like that. I'm sure if you've never worn the mask full time, I'm sure there's certain things that you may identify with where you have worn a mask momentarily here or there. You know what I mean? All right, let's talk about the rebel. Man, never conforms, always challenges, often a response to past control or betrayal, creates identity through resistance, may push others away to avoid intimacy or vulnerability. Shadow of the crash out is fear of dependence and self sabotage. Yes, I think we all have been a rebel. I know I have. And if none of these are you all, I'm sure there's somebody in your life that's worn these masks and you see these traits in this person. And this is no judgment. But sometimes we recognize traits in other people. Sometimes it's a reflection of what you've overlooked in yourself, or you've been affected by someone that wore this type of mask. The perfect one: polished, controlled, emotionally tidy, appears to be unshakable, often raised with high expectation or criticism, hides shame, messiness, and deep need for unconditional love. The shadow or the crash out is anxiety, shame, and fear of exposure. I know somebody in mind. There's somebody I know that wears this mask, and this is not even any shade or anything. This is you know um the invisible one. Okay, tries not to be seen, avoids conflict, risks, and attention. Usually formed with feelings of feeling unsafe, overlooked, or unwanted. Feels invisible, even in relationships or community. The shadow crash out would be powerlessness, fear of expression, and suppressed creativity. Okay, I have another one up here. Okay, let's go to reflection here. I want to invite you to reflect silently or out loud. Which of these masks feel the most familiar to you? Have you worn more than one in different spaces? I know I have. I just put my stuff out there. Which one is the hardest to take off? So I want you all to look at these questions. I want you to write this down. I want you to write it down. And then I want you to lament on it. I had to do it. It wasn't very pleasant, but it was freeing. Because some of us are still wearing some of these masks. We just have selective times we do it. But at the end of the day, we have to keep in mind, okay, is this a mask that's helping me survive through a season? Or is it keeping me from living through the next season? You can't let the last season mess you up for the next season of your life, or the last chapter mess you up for the next chapter. So with this particular assignment, I want you to write this down because there's an exercise we're going to do in the next section when you write this down. Okay. Also, have a worksheet for you all to do in your portal. It's a handout for you all to do in your portal. But every time I do this particular class, it's always going to be a self reflection for me. This never gets old for me. Never gets old. Never. But I will see y'all in the next class. Love, lights, positive energy to you all. Y'all know what it is. I'm the Queen.